You need to drive me to my brunch, Emily said. She was scrolling through her phone. Still in her silk pajamas. Not even looking up. I paused, zipping up the side of my dress. What time? 1 o'clock. I looked at the clock. It was already almost noon. I can't. My interview is at 1:30. Downtown. You know that. She finally looked up. Her expression, one of pure, bored annoyance. So, just move it. It's just an interview. This brunch is important. Daddy wants me to meet these people. I stared at her. Just move it. As if this final round interview, the one I had been prepping for weeks, my one single shot at getting out, was like a dentist appointment. I'm not moving it. Emily, you'll have to get an Uber. She rolled her eyes. A dramatic, world-weary sigh. You're so selfish. I'm not paying for an Uber when you're right here. I'm not right here. I'm leaving. I am not missing this. She smirked. The smirk that always came right before she dropped the bomb. We'll see. She turned her head toward the hallway. Dad, Ariel's being a brat again and refusing to help me. My stomach didn't just drop. It turned to ice. I heard his heavy footsteps coming down the hall. He didn't walk, he stomped. Like he was trying to intimidate the floorboards. My father, Michael, appeared in the doorway. He wasn't in his suit yet. But he was in prosecutor mode. He didn't enter a room. He took it hostage. His eyes were already narrowed. His case already built. What is this? He boomed. You're refusing to help your sister. I'm not refusing, I said. My voice quiet. Trying to keep the peace. Always trying to manage the explosion. I just have my final interview today. At 1:30, I can't drive her and make it back downtown in time. Michael actually laughed. It was a short, barking sound. Devoid of all humor. An interview. Right. He stepped into the room. And I instinctively took a step back. Your sister, he said, jabbing a thick finger toward Emily, who was now watching with casual interest, has an important networking event. Her future, her connections, matter. He took another step, invading my space. I could smell the coffee on his breath. She is building a future. She is an asset to this family. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, cruel hiss. Her future is important. He paused, looking me up and down with pure disdain. Yours is just a legal liability. And then he shoved me. It wasn't a small push. It was a full body, two-handed shove. Meant to move me. Meant to hurt. I stumbled backward, completely unprepared. My hip hit the corner of my heavy mahogany desk. But my arm flew out to catch my balance, and slammed. Wrist first. Onto the sharp edge. I didn't just feel it. I heard it. A sickening, wet crack as my wrist bone gave way. And a sharp, splintering tink as the glass face of my grandmother's vintage watch shattered against the wood. The hands, stopping, forever. The pain was white, blinding. I crumpled, grabbing my arm. All the air forced from my lungs. I couldn't even scream. I just gasped, staring at the unnatural angle of my hand, at the spiderweb of cracks on the watch. And that's when my mother, Jennifer, walked in. She stood in the doorway, perfectly composed in her cashmere robe. She looked at Michael, who was still breathing hard with rage. She looked at Emily, who was frozen in a kind of bored shock. Then she looked at me, on the floor, clutching my obviously broken arm. Tears of pure agony, finally streaming down my face. Her expression didn't change. No fear, no shock, no sympathy. Just cold disappointment. Ariel, she sighed, her voice weary. as if I was the one who had inconvenienced her. Why do you always have to force things to this point? My snap wasn't loud. It was dead silent. I stood there. The sharp, sickening throb in my wrist, radiating up my arm. And I just looked at my mother. I looked at her cold, disappointed face. The face she reserved only for me. And in that second, her words, "Why do you always force this?" finally landed. "I understand," I said. My voice was quiet, hollow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just understood. I turned, picked up my purse, and walked to the study. My father, Michael, was still red-faced, still breathing, like a bull. He started to say something. Another threat. Another dismissal. I walked right past him. I didn't even look at him. I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking just once. "I need you. Right now." He yelled behind me. "You walk out that door. Ariel, you walk out. And you are done." It was just noise. Furniture. I walked out of the old money house and into the real world, slamming the door shut on their perfectly curated, ice-cold life. Sarah pulled up in her beat-up sedan, took one look at my face, and then at the way I was cradling my arm, and her eyes went hard. "Hospital. Interview first," I said, buckling in. Hospital after. The next 50 minutes were an out-of-body experience. I sat across from 3 partners in a mahogany-walled conference room, a world my father insisted I'd never belong in. I smiled. I answered questions about market risk and corporate finance. I clicked through my presentation, one-handed, my other hand hidden in my lap, pulsing with a pain that felt like it was splitting my bones. I'm sure the adrenaline and the painkillers Sarah had in her glove box helped, but mostly, it was clarity. I had nothing left to lose, and I crushed it. That night, I was on Sarah's tiny couch, my arm in a cheap blue cast from the urgent care. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a hollow socket exhaustion. The doctor had confirmed it, a clean break. "You did it. Though," Sarah said, handing me a glass of water. "You got through the interview. That's the win." My phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend of Sarah's, a paralegal at the firm I had just interviewed with. Sarah read it first, and the color drained from her face. "Ari," she said, her voice tense. "You need to see this." The message was simple. "Tell your friend her dad, Michael, called the managing partner directly. Told him she was emotionally unstable and a potential legal liability. Said she attacked him this morning. He didn't just sabotage her. He tried to bury her." I went numb. It wasn't just about stopping me from going to an interview. It wasn't just about controlling my time. He had waited until I left. And then he picked up the phone and intentionally tried to destroy my entire future before it could even begin. I finally broke. Not about my wrist. Not about the interview. About her. "How could she just stand there?" I whispered, the tears hot and fast. How could my mother watch him break my arm and then blame me? Sarah sat next to me, but she didn't offer a hug. She offered something better: clarity, because that's her role. "Ari," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. "This is a system. It's a classic narcissistic structure. Your father is the source, the power, the money, the anger. Emily is the golden child, the one who can do no wrong, the one who reflects his glory. And that makes you the scapegoat, the one who carries all the family's problems, the one who has to be wrong so they can be right." She pointed at me. "But that system can't work without the enabler. That's your mother. Her job is to absorb, to placate, and to keep the system stable, even if it means throwing you under the bus. Her silence isn't weakness. Ariel, her silence is her job. She traded your safety for her own stability and status a long time ago. I stared at the wall, the pieces clicking into place. Horrible. Perfect. Toxic picture. My whole life. I wiped my face. So what do? Sarah's eyes changed. The friend was gone. The compliance expert, the paralegal, was here. We're not going to be sad, she said, a cold fire lighting in her eyes. We are going to be strategic. You can't fight an emotional problem with emotion. You fight a systems problem. With the system. You mean... Harla. She laughed. A short, sharp, bitter sound. No, HR is for employees. You're just a candidate, he slandered. And this wasn't an HR complaint. This was a legal action. Your father, a partner at a prestigious law firm, used his professional standing to slander a candidate, with the specific intent to cause you financial harm. She leaned in, her voice dropping. In the legal world, that has a name, it's called tortious interference. We are not filing a complaint against a dad. We are building a case against a licensed attorney. And we're not sending it to HR. We are sending it straight to the State Bar Association. We spent the entire night building the case. Sarah was incredible. A general mapping out a campaign. This isn't an emotional plea. Ariel, she said, her laptop open. It's a bill of indictment. She had me write a formal affidavit, a sworn statement detailing exactly what happened, the demand, the refusal, the assault, the specific words Michael used. Be factual, not emotional, she instructed. The facts are brutal enough. We attached the exhibits. Exhibit A, photos of my arm in the cast. The purple and yellow bruises already blooming above the plaster. Exhibit B, photos of the shattered vintage watch. Its delicate hands frozen at the moment of impact. Sarah labeled it, physical evidence of Michael's uncontrolled attack. Exhibit C, a digital copy of the threatening voicemail Michael had left her, proving a pattern of harassment and intimidation. At 5 a.m, she hit send on the email to the State Bar Association. The subject line read, Formal ethics complaint and notice of tortious interference against Michael, last name. Bar number 7, 2, 3, 4, 5. I expected to feel relief. I just felt empty. 72 hours later, a formal email arrived. This matter is under official review by the disciplinary board. Then, silence. Weeks of it. I went to my job, packed boxes at my old apartment, and tried not to check my email every 30 seconds. My life felt paused, hanging in the balance. Then, 2 weeks later, the law firm called. They offered me the job. I was stunned. But my father, the HR director's voice was carefully neutral. We hire based on merit. Ms. Last name. Your interview was exceptional. We hope you'll accept. I knew what it was. They were getting ahead of the problem. By hiring me, they insulated themselves from any potential lawsuit I might file. And they simultaneously distanced themselves from Michael. It was a cold, corporate décision. But I didn't care. It was an escape pod. I accepted. I was taping up the last box, preparing to move, when my phone rang. My mother. I hadn't heard from her since the day of the assault. I steeled myself for the guilt trip. The quiet disappointment. The plea to fix this. I was wrong. The voice on the other end wasn't my calm, collected, old money mother. It was a shriek. Araf. Panicked. Animal sound. What did you do? I actually pulled the phone away from my ear. Mom, what are you talking about? The bar. They called the firm. They've it. They've frozen his capital accounts, she screamed, her voice cracking. They're auditing everything. Our joint finances, the house. You didn't just ruin him. Ariel, you've ruined me. And just like that, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I suddenly saw her, not as a passive, cowed wife, but as a co-conspirator. Her silence wasn't just fear, it was a business arrangement. She got the status, the house, the money, and the lifestyle. And in exchange, her job was to manage the scapegoat and ensure the golden child succeeded, protecting the family's image at all costs. I hadn't just threatened my father's reputation, I had threatened her bank account. He's the one who broke my wrist, I said, my voice ice cold. A wrist, she shrieked. You're talking about a broken wrist when our lives are over. You selfish? Stupid girl, you've destroyed this family. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I stood there in the empty apartment, surrounded by boxes. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing. Just the cold, clean realization that I had never really had a family at all. 2 months later, I was in my new office, looking out over a city skyline that wasn't home, but felt more like it than anywhere I'd ever lived. Sarah forwarded me an email. It was a small, bureaucratic PDF from the State Bar Association. The language was dry, professional, and absolutely devastating. Pending a full formal hearing. License to practice law. Immediately suspended. It wasn't a firing. It was an execution. He couldn't consult. He couldn't appear in court. He couldn't even legally give advice. His entire identity, the one he had used as a bludgeon against all of us for 30 years, was gone. My phone rang that night. The name Michael flashed on the screen. It was the first time he'd ever called me directly. I answered. I expected yelling. I expected threats. I expected the lawyer. All I heard was a man's voice, small and hollow. You? You took everything, he whispered. It was the voice of a man who had finally been checked, who had no more moves to make. No, I said, and my voice wasn't angry. It was just true. You had everything, and you threw it all away because I wouldn't drive my sister to brunch. I hung up. A few days later, a strange curiosity hit me. I opened Instagram. I hadn't looked at my sister Emily's profile in months. The change was shocking. The old Emily was all high-angle photos at rooftop bars, tagging networking friends, holding champagne glasses, and showing off expensive bags. That Emily was gone. The new Emily had a profile full of sunsets, blurry selfies with rambling captions about finding my real self, and angsty quotes about toxic people and new beginnings. Her networking friends had vanished. The second the family money and status were put on hold, the golden child, whose entire identity was built on our father's power, had evaporated along with it. She was just a panicked, lost girl, with no idea how to exist now that her audience was gone. She hadn't just lost her connections, she had lost her entire reflection. I closed the app. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity. I just felt done. I looked down at my wrist. The cast had been off for weeks, but a faint, silvery scar remained on the bone. A reminder. I left my office, walked to a department store, and went to the counter. I didn't look at the expensive, old money brands. I bought myself a new watch. It was simple, modern, with a clean face and a leather strap. It wasn't a family heirloom. It wasn't a golden handcuff. It wasn't a promise of someone else's future. I paid for it with my own salary. From the job I had earned, I strapped it to my wrist, right over the scar. It just told the time. And for the first time in my life, the time was all mine. Sometimes, the only way to win is to use their own rules against them. Have you ever had to fight with facts instead of